Welcome everyone to another episode in the series Business Planning for Your Community Resource Centres, brought to you by Westlink and the Department of Regional Development. Today we're going to be covering in episode 8, we're going to be looking at personnel planning, and we're going to be matching up the personnel requirements of the CRC to the skills required for the different projects. We're going to be talking about risk management and identifying the risks that the CRC face and how to develop and mitigate those risks. And then we're going to be looking at succession planning and ensuring that the CRC has a plan and a strategy in place to get people into the CRC on a volunteer basis. So my name's John Denton, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today, and I am going to be ably assisted by Lee Steele, who is the coordinator of the Pingelly CRC.
John.
And Lee, you're also the chairperson of the Association of WA Community Resource Centres, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So welcome, good to have you back, Lee.
Thanks for having me.
And also I'm joined, as always, by from Andrew Huffer and Associates, the man himself, Andrew Huffer.
Thanks, John. Great to be here. I'm over my separation anxiety from last week. Haven't missed you too much, so good to be back on board.
Thank you and welcome, Andrew. So just a quick recap on some of the things that we covered in the previous episode. We spent quite a bit of time on bringing together all the work that you've done to date into a detailed action plan for your CRC. And we did that by working on pages 5 to 7 of the business plan template, where if you turn to those pages, you'll see there are 7 columns there, and we worked through putting information into all those 7 columns. So we used an example exercise of community events where we had the key outcome for DRD, the project and the project description, and then we went through and identified some of the actions, the time frames that it would take to complete those actions, putting down a budget and linking it to the actual grant from DRD, and then we looked at, well, who was going to do those projects. So now we're going to talk about planning the personnel in the CRC, and I'm going to hand over to Andrew to take over that part.
Cool.
Andrew.
John.
Tell us about personnel planning.
I'd love to. Firstly, folks, if you could turn to page 9 of your business planning template. And in there, the personnel plan is something that needs probably a bit more focus in a lot of plans, because it's one of the critical parts in making sure you have the people with the right skills to do the right functions within your CRC. And that can be staff as well as your committee and volunteers. So it's pretty important to make sure you've got those people on board. The core components of the personnel plan, as you can see here on screen, are having obviously the names, the position, the qualifications or experience, and what the professional development focus could be for those people to make sure that they're leaving the CRC with better skills than they came in with. And that's an important part in helping provide them an incentive for being involved, as well as making sure the CRC functions well. So let's have a quick look at what this may look like in your CRC. So in this case, we've got Evan Evans, who's a committee person, and Evan is the manager of a local business, so he has some pretty good business, some good skills in managing people, but Evan probably needs to lift the governance side of things. He hasn't actually ran a business before, he's managed one. So in terms of being a business owner, there's a few skills that Evan could pick up in the governance side of things which would really help him and help the CRC. And by the way, Evan Evans was actually a housemate of a brother-in-law of mine who's from Mount Bor, who's related to John Johnson, who lived down the road from Robbie Robinson.
Well, it's
a true story.
Of course, Andrew, we believe you.
Yeah.
Thank you. But on a less serious note, let's talk about the benefit of a personnel plan to your CRC. Lee, for you in your CRC, what have been some of the benefits of actually having the personnel plan documented on paper?
It has given us a really good focus on what's required to keep our skills up. It's also allowed us to implement the appropriate training for each of our members, our volunteers and our staff. We actually go forward from our PD form type thing, and we have a list of skills that board members should have as a basic list. And when new board members join, they tick off the ones that they have, and so it allows us to know the focus if any training's coming up, the department's putting any Westlink broadcasts on, for example, that we can make sure that they're involved in those things. It also works with our volunteers, some of the basic skills that they need to know, and that flows through also to our OC health and safety and stuff, so we can tick all those boxes. Particularly with our staff, it's a really good process because there are some core things that we just need to do every day to open our doors. So when we introduce new staff to our CRC, we can go through the process and know that they've learnt all those skills as they go through. And that also allows us to have a focus for their appraisal forms. So.
Good one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that CRCs may not think about in terms of even customer service training, for instance.
Yes.
You know, and getting skills on that because they're dealing with people all day long. So it's very important, and how you answer the phone. I mean, there's a lot of things that CRC sometimes just forget that they're actually running a business. And
yeah, it's those take it for granted things that a new staff member will know where the keys all are, they will know what day the bins go out. It doesn't have to be rocket science stuff that they have to be able to do. It has to be those simple things to make sure that your centre flows every day. So having that chart, and it's just a spreadsheet that we use, we put the staff member's name on and we tick the boxes across. Have they had an induction? Have they done OC health and safety? Do they know where the bins are? Do they know where the keys are kept? Do they know the passwords to get into the key box? Very simple things, but once they're done for good, and we know then that they are able to open the doors and function and worry about the core business of the day. And it also means that if they're things that they're not sure of, they know where to go to find the information.
Absolutely. In business, we call it a skills matrix.
Yes.
And you can identify where the training's required, and then you can make that part of the personal development of the staff and the board.
It's actually even a better tool for us in a way that I'm not the person who trains everyone, so the last person on may be the next person who trains the new person, so that we know they've got a good understanding, and it allows them to be interactive on lots of levels then, and start some really basic training processes that they can grow on. So.
And it also sounds to me like you've got a good system in place now, and any good business is only going to work with good systems in place.
Absolutely. Look, it's the pressure that it's taken off just myself as the manager of the CRC means that when I leave to go to events such as this, I know that everything will run smoothly on a base level. They may not be able to handle a particular difficult client on the day or whatever, but at least I know that the base stuff is happening. And it's good for them. It makes them feel comfortable, and they're very relaxed in their environment.
And on systems, I've got a writer downer here. John, systems, can you remember the acronym?
Save yourself time, energy, money and stress.
There you go.
I'll have to write that one
What
down.
system stands for.
It's a writer downer.
So one of my favourites. But it does help with bringing new people on or temporary people on, because the systems are there. All they have to do is follow the systems.
Yep, and I'd have to say for our committee, it brought a different focus, because when someone new joined the committee, there wasn't an expectation they were just going to turn up to a meeting and that would be it. They were given this introduction, their skills were identified, their shortcomings were identified, and it gave them notice that there was going to be an expectation that they would be upskilling on those things. So it sort of allowed everyone to know that it was a functioning committee, not just a cup of tea committee.
Very good.
Fantastic.
Great work. I want to just do a bit of a segue here from, you mentioned earlier sometimes you might get that difficult client that rocks up and you're not quite sure what goes on there. So I think that's a good way for us to start talking a bit about risk management now in CRCs and some of the things you need to consider in your risk management plan. And risk management, simply for me, is basically having a kind of framework in place to help you manage uncertainty. So it gives you really a plan B to work out what are some of the things that are going to affect you and how serious is it going to be, and am I actually going to need to do anything about it? So let's go through a bit of Risk Management 101, and then we'll talk about the reality of risk management in a CRC such as yours, Lee. So firstly, the first couple of steps and I'll take you through actual 5 steps, and they're all fairly simple. The first step is to define the context. And that really means, is the risk going to be related to people? Is it going to be related to perhaps resources like equipment? May even be related to funding, or perhaps even the layout of the environment you're working in. So it's really thinking about what is the actual context of the risk. The next step is, once you've sussed that out, is to go through and actually identify the risks in each of those areas. So in terms of people, it could be a difficult client that you're dealing with. It could be losing staff. It could be an equipment breakdown. It could be, if it's a funding issue, it could be that you're actually not meeting the requirements of the funder. And in the workplace, it could be a physical issue. And a simple one I've seen often is about manual handling and lifting. And for a lot of CRCs that do a fair bit of printing, it could be something as simple as think about, where do I stock all my paper? Is it on the floor, or is it actually up here at waist height where I can lift it out in probably, I think, 10 kilos is the most you're meant to be lifting, in something less than 10 kilos, so I can safely restock the printer without any manual handling issues. So it's really thinking simply about what the risks are. The next step is to actually assess the risk. And in doing that, it's thinking about what's the likelihood that the risk is going to occur, and if it does, what will be the consequences? And we've got a simple matrix that we'll show you soon, and it's also in your workbook to help you assess that likelihood and consequences side of things. Once you've done that, the next step is actually to put in place some strategies to manage the risk, which is all about thinking, how can I reduce the likelihood, or how can I reduce the consequences, or is there other ways that I can deal with the risk? And again, something as simple as the printer example, it could be thinking about, how do I structure the layout of the print room or that little section of the office to make sure that the paper is all at waist height. So I'm not going to have any, so I'm reducing the chances of any manual handling type injuries. And finally, once you've got that in place, it's a matter of monitoring, going through and seeing what's been happening with each of the risk management strategies. Are they being effective? Have we seen any more results or issues come up? And what's been the result of that? So it's really, for you in the CRC, is really think about, once you've got your projects identified, go through them, look at them from a risk management perspective, and review and incorporate any risk management strategies that need to be put in place. I wanted to hand over now, John, for you to talk with Lee a bit about some of the practical implications of risk management in a CRC environment.
Sure. Lee, we've talked about this in the past in terms of some of the risks facing a CRC, and I know you've got an acronym, PEST,
Yes.
to identify areas that your CRC looks at in terms of risk, so little categories. Would you like to explain that for us, please?
We actually we still work with the SWOT theory, but we found that the PEST, which is the political, economic, social and technology risks, were more relevant to our CRC because they were the environments that we're working in. You know, political is not just state government, it's local government, local businesses, even the local groups that meet in town all have their own little politics. We have economic because we can't open our doors unless we have the money in the bank. And we have the social because that's part of our community capacity building, but it also puts you in a space that can be a little bit fraught with danger because you're actually being involved in community groups who you may be tempted to take on some of their issues which you should leave alone. And of course technology, it's one of our core services.
Mm. And technology can be a plus or a minus, can't it? Because
yeah, it's probably the thing that we struggle with, one of the greatest, because we are good at what we deliver. We understand our own systems, but when someone walks in with a new iPad and says that an app doesn't work, the risk is that you might spend an hour trying to do that and you can't actually bill for that. So we have to be very clear in what our role is in that technology field.
Yeah, so sometimes a risk can be an opportunity and sometimes it's just a pure risk, but it's a case of looking at the different risks, and this is the matrix that Andrew referred to earlier, so that when you're looking at a risk, actually sort of rate it on this scale. Andrew, do you want to explain that for us?
For sure. And so going back, let's use the paper example again with the print room. You could look at what's the likelihood of having a manual handling injury if you're leaving the paper on the floor in its current situation. So think of a box of A4 paper, that'd be about 18 kilos with 5 reams in there. think of what would be the likelihood of having a manual handling injury from having that there. And the statistics say that it's actually going to be reasonably high. It's one of the highest workplace injuries around. So you'd be looking at high and then thinking about what would be the severity. And severity is usually rated on, is it in a workplace injury? Is it going to require treatment? Is it going to require hospitalisation? Is it going to require long-term treatment for the staff member involved? So in that case, severity, you're looking somewhere between medium and high. So it gives you a really good way just to simply put it in place, think, okay, if this is that level of risk, I better be doing something about it. So in this case, once you start hitting that medium to high level, I need to have some strategies in place, and I need to do it pretty darn quick.
Yep. So you've got to work out the likelihood of it happening and then have a plan to mitigate those risks. So, Lee, have you got some examples of the things you can do?
Well, let's stick with the paper risk. We certainly had identified that as a risk in our CRC because we move a lot of bulk paper through our centre. But we also, it took us a little while to recognise that it didn't matter what we put in place in regard to lifting it up to an appropriate level, in fact, we've got to the stage where we have a volunteer who likes to come in and help us. He's very burly and able to lift things, so his job is once a week he moves paper from a certain area to an easy access area for us. But we also recognised that was okay to have all that, but if we had someone working with us or a volunteer who has a bad back or obviously isn't able to lift things that are even moderately heavy, that created another risk because some people just want to do it because they think they should. So we actually have introduced who can and can't lift our paper because that was probably a bigger risk for us in the end, was having all this mix of people in our centre who all want to be there to help, but making sure that we didn't put them at risk, which would in turn put us at risk.
Yep.
So what was that little saying again? Who can and can't? Did you say?
Sorry, you've
who
lost me
can
there.
do the job, who can't do the job. They have the list of
Yes,
that.
yes. that's
And
what I was getting to,
recognising
yeah.
it's like we have banners hung on our walls at our CRC. Well, I mean, you only have to look at me to say obvious that I'm not going to be good on a ladder. So we've recognised the people in the CRC who would be, and that's their role. So my role isn't to get on a ladder, and if someone put a ladder there, I just go, that's not my job.
Yep.
I'm not allowed to do that because it puts me at risk, puts the centre at risk. It's just recognising common sense, to be honest. So
Common sense, but not necessarily common practice.
no. So,
Yeah.
and volunteers probably are the greatest risk in that space because they're keen and they're eager, and you don't want to dampen them either. So you can't sort of say, look, you can't do that because I don't think. So if you have a process in place and a policy even that covers that, you say because of our insurance and our risks to our work safe, this is what we do, and I'm sorry, but you're not allowed to do that. It's not personal, it's just our policy in our centre. And that sort of cuts across the need to be tactful.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned insurance because that's
Huge, yeah.
a key part of this. Insurance companies are going to look at the risks, and so your premiums could be higher than necessary if you don't have good risk mitigation plans in place.
Yep.
And the other thing is governance. The board members need to realise that they have a responsibility. If people get injured in the CRC, whether it be a visitor or a staff member or whatever, then there could be liability consequences.
So long as I believe from our training that we've received, and I'm by no means an expert on it, but as long as you've put practice in place to reduce all the hazards and to cover as much as you can, I'm sure an insurance company would see that as a positive. However, if you knew that person had a bad back and you made them the person that lifted the paper, you sort of got to opening yourself up for a bit of liability there because you haven't actually participated in making a safe environment.
And Lee, I believe one of the other risks that you guys have turned around as well as in relation to your income earning through your printing side of the business, in that you earn quite a bit of your income through printing, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. It's one
and
of
one of
our
the
major
projects
incomes.
you went from was having printing capacity which is kind of okay to something which is is pretty much one of the
Yes, yeah, it's our core income,
standouts.
and we have our print copy rate is huge. We turn over printers every year or two, and so that in itself has created a whole risk thing that we need to be sure, because we're investing big money into those pieces of equipment, and we need to make sure that we keep the income there. So we have, our risks aren't just necessarily on health and safety, they're about making sure that the clients that we have in place remain and that we can build on them and that we take every opportunity to earn the income that those printers need.
And whilst we're talking about clients, I know in the business world when we're looking at businesses and risk, that if a client is, if one single client is more than 15% of your income, then we consider it a risk.
Yes.
Because if you lose that one stream of income, then you've lost, you know, a big proportion of your turnover.
Yep.
So again, it's looking at where all your different streams of income come from, and having some backup plan.
And really clearly identifying them, because if those particular clients, and we have two that are major income sources to us, walk into our CRC, everybody knows that this is the opportunity to make sure that they feel welcome and that they leave wanting to keep using us. So all the staff have a firm understanding of that, so that's reduced our risk. When they walk in the centre, someone doesn't go, "Who are you?" and "I don't want to deal with you." They go, "Hello, such and such, I'm really glad to see you. Would you like a cup of coffee?" We already start to mitigate that risk of losing that client.
Yeah. So as John has referred to in previous episodes about building relationships and making sure that they know that they're in the Platinum Club.
Yep, I actually see that as one of the core risks for our CRCs is if we get too bogged down in local politics and that sort of area, you could lose that respect in the community. So it's very fine line to walk sometimes, because sometimes you might be involved in that club personally or whatever, but when we walk into our CRC, that is the sole focus. And if someone wants to walk in and they want to be mischievous or toxic, we call them our toxic clients, we make sure that we give them the respect and we do what they want, but we don't engage them on any further level, because we know the ramifications of being involved in that toxic environment. So
Yeah, and it's okay to sack your clients.
yes, yeah. We've actually had to do that once, and that, I didn't think we'd ever do it, but we worked out that the cost of dealing with that person, the implications on the staff morale and the stress that that person brought to our centre was just too deep and too big. We didn't earn anything from them, but they were just there all the time. And we actually found that once we were upfront with them and said, "This is how it's going," they went, "Oh, do we come across like that?" And actually made us engage him more, and we don't see him as much now, and he understands our role better.
Well done.
That's great. So the key areas to think about with assessing risk are your clients,
Yes.
as we've just discussed. Also your suppliers, so people who provide things to you for you to provide your services.
Yep.
Again, what are the risks if those suppliers disappear or can't supply any longer? And the other key area is your staff and your team.
Yes.
You know, that's a big risk as well. If you've got key people in a business or in a CRC and they leave or something happens to them or they get sick, then how are you going to cover for them? And I guess that's a nice segue into talking about succession planning.
Yes.
And the importance of that. And I know, Lee, you've done quite a bit of work in that area, because again, in a small community, you're struggling to get volunteers and people.
Absolutely, and we have some long-term staff. So the succession plan in our centre is actually called Lee's Retirement Plan, because we need to have something in place to allow people to slowly leave and new people come. So we've actually focused on how best to deal with that, and we've actually made a conscious decision to employ part-time staff. So we have 5 part-time staff who rotate through, work mixed days, so that there's still key people whose roles are, mine is to business plan, mine is to do the contract type environment, make sure that we're covered in that way, but we have another staff member who's really good at digital photography and really good at graphic design. She steps into that. We have another one who makes sure all our governance issues are dealt with and stuff. So we've given each person a bit of a key role, but we all blend within that, so that if any one person stepped out or wasn't available to come to work anymore, then that means that the centre would hit a blip, but it wouldn't be that big a blip that we couldn't overcome it.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I'm going to talk about that strategy to some non-profit organisations I know that get themselves very dependent upon individuals.
Yeah.
It's fatal. It's a high risk.
The thing I like about it too is having that mix of people going through means you're not going to have the same people with each other every day of the week. And sometimes that can lead to the risk of people getting to a bit of a cruise zone, but also a bit too familiar, and you get a bit of a click happening and
Yes.
becomes a bit of a club. So I think having that mix of people come in and out keeps people fresh all the time and ready to go.
Absolutely, and I'd have to say, even removing myself from the risk point of view, as a staff member involved in that, it's a better environment to work in. I'm happier, I'm not the key person in the centre, I don't carry the burden of if something goes wrong, it's all me, and I don't carry the burden of if I want to take a month off, what's going to happen to the CRC. So it's actually made work environment much more pleasant and comfortable for us all.
Yeah, and you're providing meaningful work for 5 people
Yes,
as
yeah,
well. So
yeah.
in the community, which is a benefit in itself.
Absolutely.
However, I'd have to say, like, some of our staff still work full time, but they work part time for us, and they pick up the other days somewhere else. So the skills that they're learning at our centre again are being put further out into the community. So it doesn't mean that we're not all working full time; we're just not working full time there.
Yeah.
So
really looking at the areas of risk to consider, there's the PEST acronym
yes,
of LEAS, the political, environment, technology and social areas, but then also there's your clients, your suppliers and your staff. And that's where the importance of the skills matrix and the succession planning comes in. So there's a lot of things to consider there. We've covered a lot today. Have you got any more questions on that, Andrew, or would you like to sum up?
I think I could pretty much sum up. I think we've, again, thanks to Lee, covered some really good practical cutting edge examples that are really going to help you in your CRC to really get this business plan close to being finished. So I think it's been a great episode yet again. To your wonderful skills, John and Lee, really indebted for your practical examples you've brought up, because it's helped us to do a couple of things to match the operations of the CRC to the skills required. It's helped people to identify the risks and develop mitigation strategies. And it's also will ensure that the CRC is able to manage changes in staff in that succession planning thing, so it happens in a smooth manner rather than just being, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Lee's gone type of drama. Drama has its place, but probably away from work, I reckon. So coming up in our next episode, we're going to be looking at measuring success. So really getting a good handle on where your CRC has come from, where are you today, and what are the successes you've achieved over that time, and how are you going to tell the world about it? Because I think that's an important part of people knowing about what is it your CRC is actually achieving for their client base. Then we'll be up to our final episode, bringing it all together. So 2 more episodes to go, and I'm sure you're getting real value from that. We've got real value today from having you here again with us, Lee. So thanks again for coming up from Pingelly again to help us out.
thanks for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure having you here. And as always, John, having had a pleasure having some time again with you.
Andrew, always a pleasure. Looking forward to the next 2 episodes as well.
You betcha. So thanks everybody. We're looking forward to making sure you get this part of your business plan completed in looking at the personnel plan and the risk management plan and the succession plan, all done and dusted. Look forward to seeing you next week. Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Toodle Bob.